right, and we are live with the first ever Riyria Explained live stream. So, continuing in a similar vein with several of our recent videos, we are trying a completely new format. I'm actually stealing this format from another channel called the Dusty Wheel, who does Wheel of Time deep dives. So if you like Wheel of Time, definitely check out that channel. And as this is the first ever live stream for Riyria Explained and myself, I can guarantee we will have no technical difficulties whatsoever. And I'm laughing because we already had some. But we nonetheless are on our way. So today we are talking about theories. So with Esrahaddon releasing in just a couple weeks, we are expecting a lot of our current theories to be disproven. Maybe some theories will be supported, and we're probably going to have a lot more theories going forward. We recently released a couple theory videos on Galarbrin and Beatrice and the afterlife. But there are several other theories in the community that don't get their own video. So we wanted to talk through some of those before Esrahaddon. And in the words of Sullivan, Esrahaddon changes everything. So that's probably going to happen. But another Riyria Explained first. I'm not going to be doing that alone. We actually have some other participants. So let's go ahead and bring them in. Perfect. All right. Hey, guys. Good to see you for the first time on this stream. All right. So introducing them, you probably don't recognize their faces, but you might recognize their names. Just above me, we have Lizzie Carr. Lizzie is an active member of the community. He's done beta reads for books such as Fairlane. So again, if you didn't like anything in Fairlane, be sure to direct message Lizzie. We also, Kitty Corner, we have Sultan Sachs, another active member in the community. If you've ever asked a question on Reddit or Discord, good chance you've gotten an answer from him. And next to me, we have Callius, who, besides Sullivan himself, I think knows more about the timeline in Elan than anyone. If you've ever seen the 20-page extreme Elan timeline document that was created by Callius. And if you haven't seen it and want to see it, come join us on the Discord. We'll be sure to stick the link to the Discord somewhere either in the chat or the description of this video. So definitely come by. We love discussing all things Elan. One more thing before we get going on the theories. We are going to be pulling from every book, every series, every Reddit or Discord post or email someone received from Sullivan on the dark web. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a spoiler warning just so people know. And definitely feel free to put your comments in the chat. I see Matthew. I recognize him from the community. Hello. Joshua is also, what's Discord? So Discord is an app. It's basically a chatting app that we use. It has different rooms where you can chat about different things. So you can download Discord online or on your phone. And then we'll put the link in so you can just go ahead and join our Elan Discord. But without further ado, let's start to get into our theories. So the first theory we have is called the Hidden Secrets of Rao. Yeah? What was that?
Hello. So you promised we would do this. I just wanted to say, like, this group, we're like, not like an established thing, but we are an established thing. And they promised me we get to mention this. So we are called the Text Lore Seekers. I came up with the name. Very proud of it because lore is like L-O-R-E, and it's really geeky. And I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Lizzie, for pointing that out. Yes. I had that in my notes and I completely skipped over it. Perfect. Awesome. All right. So I'm gonna kick it over to you, Callius, for the first theory.
All right. Thanks, Jabba and Liz, for the awesome intros there. So my theory is called the Hidden Secrets of the Rao. So the Rao are one of my favorite topics in Elan. They're very mysterious. We don't really know a whole lot about them, but there's a lot of good nuggets spread throughout all the different stories. So my theory is that I believe the Rao were once powerful users of the art, as well as possibly practitioners of a magic that's even more ancient and powerful, but I'll get to that part later. So in Fairlane, we are told that the Riva were generals of Uberlin who became the first Rao. And I think it's likely that Turin/Uberlin may have taught magic to some of his followers. We see that the descendants of his people, the goblins, also known as Gazelle or Uber-Ram, are capable of wielding the art. These are known as the Oberdaza, and we encounter them in many of Sullivan's books, such as Age of Myth, Nolan, and of course Persepolis. So if the Oberdaza learned magic from Turin, then I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that his generals, the Riva, would have learned it as well. Perhaps the Oberdaza are even descended from the Riva. So the Riva may have been wielders of magic, but what does that mean about them being Rao? Well, I think a big hint for this comes from the short story Pile of Bones. If you guys haven't read that, I would definitely recommend checking that out. There's a lot of good lore nuggets, both about Rao and many other things in there.
The story that got me into Sullivan, actually.
Yeah, it's a really good one. So in Pile of Bones, Suri encounters the Rao, and Rao tells her this: "I'm what those like you become. Little ones with power grow up to be big ones with desires. You don't want to die, do you? Of course you don't. You're terrified of dying, and you've only been alive a few years. Imagine the lust for life after you've been living for decades, and just picture how powerful you'll be by then. So potent that the rules won't apply to you. When the day comes to leave your body and move on, you'll refuse. But there's a problem. Your body is weaker than you are. It rots. That's why everyone else leaves. No one wants to live in a rotting shell. But you're powerful. You don't have to. You can keep it, not perfect, but well enough. All you need is a good meal and some beauty sleep." So I think that quote spells it out pretty clearly.
I
So the
agree.
Rao, like Suri, are practitioners of magic, and they use their magic to artificially extend their lives. Something like a lich in typical fantasy settings like D&D. However, I think the magic needed to accomplish this is beyond just the scope of the art. After all, if it only took the art to become a Rao, then where would be the Mirrorleaf Rao and the Senzar Rao? We don't see any of those. So I think there's another ingredient, another kind of magic that is stronger even than the art. Michael himself has alluded to other sources of these powers on the Discord. I believe Jobble's going to put up a quote of his there.
Yeah, let's see.
So unlike the art, which draws power from the physical world, from Elan, this magic draws power from the immaterial, from souls, from Eden. And I believe we've seen this magic before already. In ancient times, the Typhons used this magic to give life to earth and stone and created the giants. The dwarves would later discover this magic and use it to create the golems. Essentially, the golems, as we learn about them in Winter's Daughter, work by binding the caster's soul to some kind of inanimate vessel, like the gargoyle. Or we also see Midian use it in Age of Death when he creates, the giant golem to fight the dragon. So I think that the Rao work in a similar way, but instead of using something like a gargoyle or a statue, they're using their own bodies, perhaps their own corpse, even. So the soul magic, if that's what you want to call it, I've also heard it called Etonian magic after Eden, keeps them bound to their body. And then they use the art to kind of preserve their body the best they can. One pretty interesting connections I found between the Rao and the golems is that both of them require a sort of physical sacrifice. The golems require human hearts, and the Rao require human faces. Perhaps the reason that a Rao can't sleep until eating a face is because that's sort of like the regent of the spell. Eating the face, recharges the spell and allows them to maintain it for a little bit while they're sleeping. So yeah, that's pretty much my theory there. In conclusion, a Rao powerful magic user. They use multiple types of magic to extend their life, utilizing a sort of soul magic to maintain their existence, similar to the dwarves' golem magic.
Awesome. Yeah. I think one thing that I like about this theory is one thing that always bothered me when we went to Pyre. We didn't see a lot of incredibly strong artists. There was that battle between Grendel and Phenelaus, but I think Michael has made it clear that there are they were not the first people to have the art. During the First War, there were a lot of beings that knew the art. So it's like, where in Pyre are those beings? And this kind of solves
you
that.
Definitely think you would expect to see, some of these ancient magic wielders in Pyre, but we don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. I think what really sealed it for me was what you said at the end there with the regents. I think it absolutely that makes the most sense, because the entire time you were mentioning the theory, and I have the fortune of not actually having read any of y'all's theories before, because I wanted to keep it fresh, and that's usually how I get better reactions from myself. But the whole time you were explaining your theory, I was thinking, but why do they eat people's faces? Like, that doesn't really solve the issue about the requirement that they have to eat a person's face, and the fact that golems also require human sacrifice component. That really does seal it together. I think I don't see too many holes in that. It'd be pretty funny if it was all coincidence and Michael accidentally created a second form of golems in his world, but something tells me that's not the case.
Yeah, I've actually been kind of cooking on this theory for a really long time, but it was only a week or two ago that I was doing some research and I realized the parallel with the golems, and I was just like, that's perfect.
Dude, it seals it, honestly.
I think what's interesting is that this is not there are multiple creatures we've seen who are kind of holding on to life after death, right? We had, I think his name is Meeks. He's a shade. He showed up in the Mystic Wood, right? I think it's the Mystic. No, not the Mystic Wood.
The swamp.
Swamp thing. Yeah. And there was a similarity there where he refused to die, sort of thing, right? And I remember Muriel saying that she helps those types of souls. So maybe these are a very specific set of souls that Muriel wasn't able to help pass on. There's also a connection with Macaretta / I guess the Lady of Dulgath / Lord Fox or something. And the fact that she's required by Farrell's law to not be able to pass on, but she's able to use the art to control something else that isn't her own body, right? You were saying that the Rao uses their own body. Macaretta said that she used squirrels, she used raccoons. Eventually she was able to possess humans, and then with hands she was able to do the art, right? So there's still that connection of all these different creatures that are Etonian, they use just their soul, but they're possessing Elan based physical forms. The Rao just so happens to be one that has to eat faces and is, I guess, possessing their own physical form, despite the fact that it passed on.
I think that's actually a really good point, because the whole thing with the difference there between Rao and Macaretta is the whole issue for Macaretta was that she couldn't use the art at all. That essentially confirms that whatever she's doing with possessing people with her soul, or beings with her soul or whatever, is not at all related to the art, which is outright said, but in this context has a whole other level to it of you can now imagine that the difference there is that she doesn't have to maintain sacrifices, presumably taking the other quote that you took from Pile of Bones with the Rao, because it's not her own body. And I think that that's really the whole thing here, is utilizing your own body after a certain point, or maybe it's just anybody after a certain point, is what requires the sacrifice to keep it sustained.
I think actually an even better example of that than Macaretta is with Trilos, because
Yeah.
Trilos.
Oh yeah,
You see him like hopping bodies all the time. He's always looking for a new body.
Otherwise, he'd have to eat people's faces.
Yeah, exactly.
In the chat, Matthew brings up a interesting thing that we never see Mwandale's older brother, Peridian, in Pyre. So I think that's another example of a very strong artist we don't see. Of course, he could have gone to, Rel or Allison. It's possible he's not even in Nifril, but it's also possible he never went to Pyre.
Very true.
That is a great point. I do wonder a lot about Peridian. There's a lot there that, there's enough there where you could think about Peridian and be like, all right, this was a character created solely to represent something that Mwandale needs to strive to be, like from a writer's perspective, and like also explains, colleges for the art and things like that. But it also, I think it's definitely purposeful that you don't see him in the afterlife. You see not Farrell. Well, you do see Farrell, but not who I'm referencing. His grandmother, whose name I can't remember. Yes, Peneleus. You see Peneleus in the afterlife, but you don't see Peridian, and that's just odd to me. I agree that there's probably not any Rao that are Frey. Or I don't know, that you didn't say that exactly, but it was implied by the context of where Rao are seen and where they aren't. But I don't think that Peridian is a Rao. Honestly, I think that there's something else funky going on there. Either we didn't see him, it's possible there, but my end goal here is saying that I think that it's possible that Frey Rao are different in some capacity. There's no like stories of them, and if I remember correctly, Arian has no word for a Rao, and even when it's explained to her what a Rao is, she's like, "What are you talking about? You're a weird barbarian. Just keep playing with the string, please."
Yeah.
So I think that the concept of a Rao is at least different in the Freylands. Sorry, I know that was pretty long-winded. My bad.
Yeah, no, I like.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying I don't mind him being long-winded. I like that.
Yeah, I think we see 4 Rao in the books, right? We see him Pile of Bones, the one underneath in Age of Swords, the one in Alan Wrist, and then the one that's, I guess in Blythen, right?
Yeah, kind of implied to be there.
Yeah, so we see 4, but it is interesting in the letter that Bran wrote that we get to read in Fairlane. He, when he talks about them being Riva and coming from Riva, he says they were generals of Uberlin's army who became the first Rao. And it almost sounds like, did Bran meet other Rao in his adventures? Like, does he know a bunch of others? And he's like, oh, these are just the first ones.
Right.
But,
maybe.
Yeah.
I have 2 points. The first is that I just realized another creature that kind of exists out, like the Etonian and Elan aspects are kind of separated, is Wraith's Galarabrin, right? Since Wraith's soul is in Allison, but he's still connected to the Galarabrin, he's still I don't know, can say things, can hear what's happening, right? There's that sort of connection between a spirit and a body that isn't a physical form that isn't, I guess, your own. Just to jump on, to, I don't know, make a unified theory about different soul, Elan, Etonian aspects. And the other thing was when you mentioned the Rouse, I just remembered that we know that both Mwandale was at Blythen Castle, or at least the spot around Blythen Castle at some point between Age of Empire and Nolan. We also know that Turin goes to that spot. At least we think Turin went to that spot. Michael was not very I don't know, explicit about what part of the Goblin Sea he was at, but I think it's there. I think he went to that spot too, so we know that major key players were in that area around where the Rao is seen, and there's actually a lot that goes in Blythen Castle too, just in general.
Ezrahaddon is definitely going there at some point.
Oh, for sure. That's where. That's just where Erebus is. Actually, it's just underneath Blythen Castle.
It's the Persepolis of Erebus.
Persepolis
Exactly.
2.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a comment I really like from Jessica. If a Frey Rao killed another Frey, would they still go to Pyre, though? They could just be leaving
Oh.
Frey
Wow.
land so they can prey on humans. So, like, Peridian becomes a Rao, but says, someday I still want to go to Pyre. I'm going to leave Erevan, go somewhere where I can prey on things. So that I don't
And it's
break Pharaoh's
certainly
law.
not implied by the text that the Rao that are west of the Nidwalden are necessarily human. We just assume because they're west of the Nidwalden.
That's a fun thought. I like that.
That is fun. I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
I wonder how Pharaoh's law applies when you like are a Rao.
I'm sure
is
it
this
still
something Thorin
applies.
thought about?
I think it would still apply. It seems like Eaton's key is able to kind of go through other rules. Like he simply is the law of the universe. So whatever is made through Eaton's key seems to really seal the deal. Like that is what you have to deal with, basically.
Nice.
Did Eden's key cause the ice? Sorry, this is just a tangent, but I just realized like, is Eden's key the reason the Ysera are like, or not? I guess not the reason they're mortal, but like they all had like lifespans other than Touran, right? But Trilos beat that. Like Trilos beat this inherent mortality somehow by like getting through. So like, what rules did he?
I think
break
it's
in order to do that?
functional immortality. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it is functional immortality that they have. I believe they are immortal, but not unkillable. I don't necessarily, unless I'm wrong on that, because it's been over a year since I've actually read the novels in full. But do you guys know off the top of your heads?
I think Touran
Yeah,
was about to die.
Mm-hmm.
It is age based.
Well,
Yeah,
like I don't know
he
if it
was,
was
like,
age
getting
based.
old.
Yeah.
I'll talk about this more on my theory. It's kind of relevant.
All right. Any other thoughts before we go to our next theory?
Not from me, maybe from the comments.
All right.
This will probably be answered in Pi. Let's be honest. Like it's gonna be a thing.
Probably.
We will see. All right. Let's put up theory number 2, which are the Toulan leaves are originally grown from a piece of Alluria's fruit Touran had left over. And Lizzie, I will throw it over to you on this one.
Okay, I particularly do not remember which things I quoted, but anyway, the idea is this: like there are only a few people that had the ability of like future sight or foresight before we get to Revelations, right? And that's like the Ysera, just essentially the Ysera, and we're calling them Iseralings, like Muriel, and I guess like
That was my term. I forgot about that.
Iseralings, yeah, like just Muriel essentially, like so Muriel and like the different Ysera, and then Touran can see everything, right? They all have different levels of future sight. Except when we get to Revelations, we discover that like the Calais, they have people that can use like some form of future sight. For example, Gwen, right? And when Trilos does future sight, he needs to really focus. Yes, specifically the Tenkin. When Trilos does future sight, he really needs to like focus in, but Touran can see everything everywhere all at once. And Muriel, I think Muriel has like geographic future like sight, so she can see everything all at once, but she can't like at every point in time. And it's just interesting that Gwen, like a lot of the plot around Revelations, at least the second half of Revelations, comes about the fact that Gwen knows what's going to happen. Gwen knows that Royce is like the Fane heir person, and that he needs to defeat the elves in order to, he needs to live in order to save the humans. And so like Gwen does a bunch of things because of her knowledge of that. And so my question was like, why does Gwen have foresight when this is seemingly from Legends just an Ysera like ability? And I think it was Sultan who mentioned that it said that Muriel only ate a bit of the fruit, right? So Touran picks 2 fruit, eats the whole of one, and saves one. And then when he gives it to Muriel, Muriel only eats a little bit of it. So what happened to the rest of it? So I know there's one theory out there that Beatrice got it. I'm saying that it was planted in like the east, and it was in Calais, and it became like the source of the Toulan leaves, because the Toulan leaves are what give the Tenkin their ability of future sight. And that's just the connection that the fruit itself gives Touran more like future sight. And I think that the Toulan leaves are just like a component of that, right? They're lesser, they're more diluted, and so it doesn't give the immortality, but it does give the future sight. And
The Oberdaza also use Toulan leaves. And other than the Tenkin, I'm pretty sure they're the only ones that do this.
interesting. Okay, but like they have the art otherwise, right?
We don't know that for sure.
Okay.
I think yes. I think yes, that they do have the art, and then because we already know that the art doesn't provide future sight, but they also have future sight, probably because the Tenkin have future sight using Toulan leaves. I'm going to have to assume that the Gazelle have future sight. There's a few times where Gazelle are described to have been monstrous in their ability to pretty much be everywhere all the time. When you're fighting them in their homelands, and I think that that's not necessarily just because they're really good hunters. I think it's partially that, but I think it's also because they have Oberdaza telling them, hey, this is where they're gonna be, and that's why there's always Gazelle, always, or Gazel, depending on which book you're going off of with the audiobooks. I'm still reeling from Tim with that one, honestly.
I remember there was an explanation, but
the explanation was that I'm pretty sure Michael was too busy during the recording of Nolan and Fairlane, and it is simply Gazel in the Rise and Fall. I like it as a in-world explanation of like dialect changing over time, or just people pronouncing the word differently, but it doesn't solve when the narrator just says Gazel.
We love TJR. You are
TGR is he's the best on the platform. No TGR slander here.
Perfect. And just to support this, I'm going to put up your quote that you sent over really quick about Fan Ilanu. So is it true that you are a visionary? Royce asked Fan Ilanu. She nodded. With the burning of the Toulan leaves, I... Give him a demonstration, Zoran interrupted, causing her to look at him sharply at him. Read this one's future, he said, gesturing towards Royce. And I think that's really kind of supports that idea, because he asks, can you see the future? And she says, with the burning of the Toulan leaves, and then she gets cut off. But it's like, so without these leaves, you couldn't do anything? Though I guess Gwen, we don't really know. Gwen doesn't use them later, though, right?
Well, we never... Oh, I guess in Rose and Thorn, she uses the...
He touches people.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
she doesn't ever use leaves. She looks in their eyes and makes a physical contact with them. And I think that that's extremely interesting, considering that's the only form of that we see in the entire, like, all of Elan.
True. As
the readers, anyway. We haven't seen anyone else that needs to physically come in contact to actually perform that rite. I think. Wait, actually, did the Tenkin woman that Royce got touched by? Was that a touch situation as well? Is this just a thing with the Tenkin that they can only see it if it's like, damn? So maybe it isn't. I still think it's related to the Toulan leaves, but there's also another component to it. They have to touch people. Like, didn't she touch Royce in the Emerald Storm? That one Tenkin woman who's like a cousin or something of maybe it's not a cousin, but maybe she's just in the same tribe.
Yeah, in the same. Yeah, I think. Oh, one of us should probably pull up the passage, but I believe it was like sort of like a palm reading, right? Which meant that she had to hold his hand. So I presume.
Yes, maybe it's a palm reading, but really it's a I have to physically touch you thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Much like how I think that's a part of why, amongst other reasons, but I think that is a part of why what's her name, Gwen was not a prostitute like the rest of the girls. Probably because touching her provides strange applications of future sight. So she's just doesn't want to deal with that, or doesn't want to see the future sight of these, horrible people that are coming to have sex with her and her girls.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I think either way, though, the Toulan leaves, even if Toulan leaves, did come from Alluria's fruit, they could just act as basically an enhancer of the art of Elan's or Eaton's power. So
Yeah, I just looked up the passage here, and Fawn Lanu, when she reads Royce, she does touch him, but she like precedes that with the Toulan leaves.
Okay.
So that could be her like powering up, so to speak.
Yeah, I think we have kind of two options there of either Gwen is using the Toulan leaves in a way that we don't necessarily know how, like whether that's like she has crushed up Toulan leaves and she, I don't know, like hits a snort or like puts some under her tongue or something like that. Obviously, it's burning, I think, is the thing. It's certainly implied that you have to burn it. So I think they might, like, I don't know, maybe we can rescan the books at some point and see if Royce ever notices her burning anything. Maybe that'll be in Chronicles. But burning something and then proceeding to touch somebody. So either that's how she does it, she's hiding it from people, or something different is going on with Gwen specifically, and she doesn't actually need the Toulan leaves anymore. Do we have anything from the Rose and Thorn that implies that Gwen, it just happens when she touches people?
I just know that she looks in the eyes, because she looked in the eyes of like Kyle and such, and that's how she like trusted him.
That's true, but that could be because Kyle's an Asira, and also the whole like thing with like Turin being connected specifically to the Toulan leaves, which, before I forget, I want to mention, feels like a verbal progression of language there. Turin, to like maybe Turin's leaves, because Turin gave them the leaves to Toulan's leaves or something to Toulan leaves. And that is why the plant is Toulan.
They do say in Pile of Bones that Turin loves naming things after himself.
This is true.
So,
Tura, for example.
And Elan leave.
Yeah.
Ooh,
also
I
possible
like
that it is it's a combination, a portmanteau of Turin and Elan. I personally think it's a progression of language, but that's just me, and I don't think there's anything real there. I'm just nitpicking because that's me. Sorry.
But the fact that Gwen had future sight was very important to the plot of Revelations, and therefore like Turin's plan.
Yeah.
Right. Like Gwen having the future sight basically saved the world, and that's all Turin wants. So like I think there is that connection there that Turin is, always trying to put things so that things happen in the future.
He's also trying to find ways to remove himself directly from the situation as much as possible, because that fulfills more of the promise he made to Muriel than anything. Of just like, I swear I will make things right, but I won't do it myself.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just gonna happen.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on the Toulan leaves before we go to the next theory? All right. Perfect. Let's move over to the next one. Turin and the Typhons worked together. So this is one of mine. It is out there, but I want to do it just because it's so fun. All right. So to set the stage, basically we know Trilos gets murdered and goes down to Pyre. And then once he's down there, some more people start dying from either old age or from Turin's war. And they tell him that Muriel has become immortal. And so he can never see her again. And so it's at that point that Trilos is probably super mad. And he probably either is just depressed, he just wants revenge on Turin, or he just wants to get back and see Muriel. And so we get this quote from Age of Empire. When Trilos found out Muriel would never be joining him, he threw himself into the abyss. The tablets don't actually say why. Maybe he thought there would be a way out down there, or it could be that he was hoping the Typhons would obliterate him from existence. So we know he went into the abyss, but we don't know exactly why. He didn't say on the tablets. So the first thing I want to talk about is the abyss. It's kind of a weird design. So they create Pyre, and they make the abyss to store the Titans, but they make a giant chasm that other beings could just fall into. And that could be how they designed Pyre, or it could have been designed as a completely separate section. You know, maybe there's a portal to get to the abyss or not, or maybe there wasn't. But it kind of strikes me as weird that they created this giant chasm. So this is where the theory kind of starts. What if there wasn't a chasm from Nifril to the abyss at the beginning? And it would have had to have been created. Now we know the Typhons are, besides Elan, Eton, and Eluria, they're the next most powerful beings, you know, in the planet, in the universe that we know. Could they have created it? And then also, could they have worked with Trilos to create it? You know, they're on the bottom, Trilos is on top. They work together and create it. And why would they have worked together? Well, you know, Trilos is looking for a way to hurt Toulan, and creating a chasm that big, we know that's actually part of Elan. That rock is Elan. So that would have huge repercussions up on the surface, you know, creating huge earthquakes, maybe creating huge floods. Do we know of any of that was going on at the time?
Wow.
When that exact thing happened to Erebus, destroyed it. So now by working with that, the Typhons get what they want, which is a way to get to the other parts of Pyre, or people to be able to come down to the abyss, and Trilos gets a little bit of a revenge. Now Trilos jumps down. He could have just been really depressed, or maybe he was jumping down to work with the Typhons. And so where does he go next? He goes to that cave, the cave that Bryn and party ends up finding. And we know from how they describe it that this is not a naturally made cave. It's made from, you know, just huge hands or something, claws digging into it, which clearly is the Typhons. They're the only ones that could have really done that. And they say, well, the Typhons were probably just trying to dig their way out. But also, we don't see any other signs of digging. You know, would they have just tried one hole and then gave up at that point? So perhaps they weren't trying to dig out for themselves. They were trying to dig out for Trilos because they were trying to get him out for some reason. So now let's talk about the Typhons. Like, what are the Typhons doing? I do have a quote right here from when on a Zoom call we asked Michael about the Typhons and where their powers come from.
We also had locked up the Typhons. So all of that is true and all that has not changed.
Before you put that up, I wanted to interject. I think
But
that
there
it
is
is...
Here, I'll stop it really quick.
Sorry.
Only the
I think there's
are the sound on the video, so it's a little... But go ahead, yeah.
I think there's a stark possibility that the reason why, in this form of the theory and the events, that the Typhons were digging specifically to get to that point that was thin between Elan and Nifril, that specific cave that led to the Agave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and I'll talk about that in a second. But
Okay, sorry.
No problem. I'll play that video.
We also had locked up the Typhons. So all of that is true and all that has not changed.
But as far as where they get their strength from,
But
their
there
power from,
is one massive component that you don't know about yet.
Also, you guys can't see, but I love Robin's face at the end of the video. She's like, okay, more things you can't say out loud. But basically it's saying there is something big about the Typhons that we don't know. So what is that big thing? Well, when Bryn is in the abyss, she's walking around the caverns, the fissures, and she says they're very porous. They've got a bunch of holes in them. And then as we get closer, we realize what are in the holes. Well, they're souls of people. And those souls are like melting and stuff. And then we see, what are the Typhons doing this whole time? Well, I think it's when Gifford and Roan are climbing out that they look down and the Typhons are just doing like a big circuit around the abyss. They're just walking around. So what exactly are they doing? And the one theory is that they are actually feeding. They're feeding off the people. They're basically doing a big circuit, just walking past all these souls over and over again. So they could be feeding on their souls. But then there's one other quote that I noticed, and this comes from Ivor, who is in the abyss. And it says this: he couldn't recall the last time he'd left his place. This didn't surprise Ivor, as he was finding it increasingly difficult to remember just about anything. He still knew his name, the first part at least. There had been more, a qualifier of some sort, but he couldn't figure out what that might have been. His life was fading, memories dissolving. Ooh. And this last line, memories dissolving, sounds really familiar. Like, where have I heard of another being and their memories dissolving? Well, of course, that is Trilos while he was in the abyss. We often think of him destroying his memories in order to, like creating a Galarbrin, create that, emotional energy to escape. But the question is, did he destroy his memories, or were there other super powerful beings down there that are able to already destroy memories and feed off of them that just also helped him to get across? So, kind of like, why would Typhon and Trilos work together? Well, to create the abyss itself, Trilos has potentially a way to escape down to go into the abyss, and he has some revenge on Toulan by destroying Erebus. The Typhons would like the chasm because they can potentially escape up, or at the very least have people souls fall down to them so they can feed. And then, but why would the Typhons want Trilos to escape? I mean, that's obvious for Trilos. He wants to escape. He wants to get back to Elan. But the Typhons, why would they want Trilos up there? Well, one theory is to just sow chaos. The more deaths and war they have to bring people to Nifril and potentially down to them, the better if they're feeding off them. But there is one big problem to this, in that when they let Trilos go back to Elan, he could sow chaos, but also Muriel's still on Elan. He could just go to Muriel and live, happily with her. He's only a soul, but still, he could just be with him, and that would be a problem for the Typhons. But how could they fix that? Well, if in doing so, they made it so he had to erase all of his memories of Muriel, that's no longer a problem for the Typhons. Now they know they're just sending, a loose cannon up there to sow chaos, and hopefully their end goal, start Golrock, which is unlocking the doors to Pyre and letting everyone out, hopefully for them, including themselves. So that's that theory. It's a little out there. What do you guys think?
I love that.
I think that there's an interesting question that is raised then, is how did Trilos create, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but like that monster thing at the bottom of the game, right? What if it wasn't Trilos who made it? Like, what if he was told how to make it from the Typhons, which would connect then, because the Typhons are connected to the giants somehow, and the giants are connected to the dwarves somehow, and the dwarves using that magic can create golems, right? Which is like the closest thing we have to a Galarbrin, right? Or at least that like sentinel magic, right? They're very similar in that case. And before, I guess, Suri discovers it from Trilos, no one else ever creates something like that. No one is able to create like fake life with the art, right? Until they like discover it, and then it becomes like a whole thing, right? And perhaps the Typhons then, like the Galarbrin magic is similar to whatever things the Typhons do to make, I guess, the giants, the golems, and all that stuff, right? Which is, for this group, that question of what does the Typhons do and how they make things is a very large question.
Yeah.
Indeed. Wow, there's a lot to pick apart in your theory, Jobble.
I really like the part about like them destroying his memories, because that's always been something that's kind of just been like hand waved away. Like, Trials just like deletes his memories, and somehow it just like happened, and that's never explained how he did that.
And there's also not anything on Elan. There's nothing ever from any of the most powerful artists referencing using your own memories as a fuel, basically. I think there is some really interesting stuff here, specifically in the idea that, like, okay, Trilos is working with the Typhons. As you said, what is the Typhons' end goal? If it's to cause Golrock, then how do they do that? They do this by getting a psycho Asira little cousin to go above ground again and go do crazy stuff, except they need payment of some kind. That payment being something that allows them to fuel their power enough to get them into where, or rather to get Trilos to where he needs to be, which is that specific point that is a really thin line between Nifril and Elan. That's pretty interesting. If they already are feeding on souls, maybe it could be considered that memory is part of your soul. I think there's enough in the series that alludes to that in the form of how long Rao are around, as well as how memory and things like that can be assisted along with the art. And we see that like with Macaretta, where she is very much not a Rao, and there could be other reasons to that, but from what we see in the books, it is very much that the art is assisting her, like, from going crazy, basically, from turning into something like Meeks. And wait, I had it. I lost how that ties back to the Typhons. Memory as fuel. Yeah, that's the whole thing there. I think that there's something to be said about how much power or individual parts of a soul have, and for an Asira's soul, that's huge. That's a big chunk of power. If an Asira is like, okay, let me give away the most fond part of my memory possible here. I think that feels really likely. I don't know.
I wonder if faces or even hearts could be a source of memory for those that need memories as fuel.
Maybe.
Because, like, why faces? Sorry, just to bring back to the route. Like, that's the thing I never understood. Why faces?
Yeah.
Right? And it's possible that, obviously, like, Elan biology is not the same as our own. So it's possible that, like, your face is somehow connected to your memories, right? Or even your face represents a lot about emotion, right? Because you show emotion through your face. And that could also be like a reason why the Rao is like taking faces, because it has the most emotion, which we know emotion, memories, they're all like that sort of fuel for the art.
And of course,
Nice.
hearts are connected to emotion as well, even though it's not literal, but like figuratively.
Yeah. That actually, I see why you made that face a second ago, Kalias, because that makes a lot of sense. Not only are hearts something that represent emotion, but the face also shows emotion like that. And if it's possible, maybe we're creeping up on some idea here of emotions being a fuel as well as memory. And again, like I said, parts of a soul being able to be used as fuel for magic, whether that is Etonian or Elanian.
Yeah, and I think emotion, for some people might not know this, but the act of creating a Glarbrin kind of has two parts of why someone needs to basically kill someone they loved. The first part is creating the power, which is actually the person who's dying, their soul leaving their body, like splitting an atom. But the emotional part, the part that why it's important for the person to like love the person, is because they need such strong emotions in order to be able to capture that power right when it happens. And so in that instance, the emotion isn't necessarily power, but it is needed in harnessing power.
It's like the Coulomb force.
That is
I do physics.
Surprisingly more cohesive than I was expecting this theory to, or that part of the theory to branch out onto, because I'm actually starting to believe that pretty hard now. Memories and emotions are such a big part of what I think we in real life would consider our soul. It is what makes us up. We can relegate those things to specific parts of our brain, but we can also, I think, spiritually accept that this is, if there is a soul, that's where it's contained. Is like it contains memories, it contains our emotions. It contains things that make up who we are, rather than simply the idea of a part of the brain. And I think that that idea is power on Elan. The idea of something being able, of a concept being able to make up who somebody is power. That is where the power from the Galarabrine comes from. That's, in my opinion, in this scenario, where the power to bust through the afterlife into the real world comes from. Yeah.
Nice.
I'll be right back.
Say Nimbus also made a comment about these like the ideas and the memories and the stuff like that. Like I remember, I think it was to Amelia, and Amelia's like, "Wow, Nimbus, you're doing so good. You're like such a great thing for the Empire." And he's like something along the lines of like, what's more important for this empire is not like the physical aspects, but like the ideologic the ideas that like arise, right? Like that we have the ideas, the tenets that keep the empire going. And I think that was one of the main things he said about the like restarting the Teshlors and the Censars, was like the empire needs those things more than they need like Nimbus to guide them. And so it's interesting that like Toulan is like the most powerful person we know, and he's saying that like ideas are more important than like physicality.
Yeah, and I do like this. Rich just said from our previous theory, Royce only sees the ashes of burn leaves once. It was right before Gwen told him not to leave the monastery. So when we're talking about the Toulan leaves, that's could be a little Easter egg right there.
Oh, interesting.
Perfect.
Interesting. I wonder if because was it that scene where there's the knife and Royce and Hadrian and Gwen are all talking, and then like Gwen tells Hadrian like, you got to make sure Royce like comes with you and whatever. Like I wonder if in that scene there's any like mention of ash or fire or anything, because that's like the only other time we like know kind of that Gwen is predicting the future, because that becomes like the show him mercy line. That's very important, and it's in that scene where they have like, I just remember a knife in the table. I don't know why that is like key, but there was a knife in the table.
Do you remember what book that was from?
I believe it's Emerald Storm, because this is before they go on the like. This is where Royce is like, yeah, Hadrian's got this, and then Gwen's like, no, go with him.
All right. We can probably go on to the next theory. Oh, perfect timing. I was going to say.
It's either Emerald Storm or the third book, what you're referring to, Liz. Also, the commenter who made that point, I was listening. That's excellent. That is an excellent point, and I remember that, and I think that it is actually evidence of the burning of Toulan leaves.
Awesome. All right. Theory number 4, fallen stars. All right, I'll leave this to you, Sultan.
Hey there, guys. I do have a tendency to walk around and talk, but no, not here. I have this theory that I call fallen stars as a reference to something that Beatrice says, and honestly, this is pretty small compared to the other 3 theories. There's not a lot to go off of here. The first thing in the theory, if you don't mind putting it up, Jobble, is the quote about how the Aethera were formed. If I remember correctly, the way that goes is essentially that... Oh, I'll just read it. I see it now. While Etan slept, Elan stole 5 of his teeth and sowed them in her soil. From them, the Aethera were born. Toulan, Trilos, Ferrol, Drome, and Mara. When Etan learned of the Aethera, he was angry, and Elan pled with him not to send her new children into the abyss. I think that here it could be said, due to previous description of Etan as the sky and the universe, and Elan as the world, the earth, that sort of thing, Father Sky, Mother Earth concept, that Etan as the universe, it could be described that any part of him is a celestial body, honestly. And in my opinion, I think that these teeth that are being stolen and planted into Elan are meteorites. of a certain substance. This god substance is what I've been calling it as of an hour ago. And I think it is the same thing that makes up Midian's sword, if you could pull up the other quote. Let me see that. It is described in a interesting way, such as being forged of a fallen star. I'll get it in a second here. I'll read the quote to you guys. But the idea here is that if the only thing out there that is described as a potential fallen star, and here's the quote, "What do you know about Laurelian Rain? What everyone does, that it was forged by the Master and Vare Burling from a bit of star that had fallen from the sky. That's right. It was a one of a kind creation." And I think that there is something to be said maybe about the one-of-a-kind creation part of it. Maybe she means that it is only one of a kind in the sense that there's only one item or object made out of it. Because personally, I think that sounds a lot like a meteorite falling out of the sky, a fallen star. That is what we called meteorites for a very long time in the real world. And when you take that into account with the bit about Elan stealing teeth from Eton and planting them, and then from there growing the Asira, I think that it is distinctly possible that there is some kind of funky thing going on with this god metal or god material that is formed from Eton himself and put onto the planet. I think that it is a bit odd to describe it as a shining star in any other way other than the concept that it could be a meteorite. If it is some kind of magical fallen star where it's still glowing when they forged it or something like that, that might be different. But there, like I said, there's not much to this, but I think it is something that we may get hints at later on. And I can't think of anything else that really ties along to it. But something interesting and food for thought here is that there's nothing else in the entire series that references fallen stars or anything fallen out of the sky. At least not to my knowledge, that really feels sort of in the same vibe. You get a lot of stuff, as Kalius helped me out with before the stream. You get a lot of stuff that references Elan and Eton coming together, such as Illyria or the Typhons, but not in the same way where Elan stole the teeth or something shot from the sky and landed on the planet. There's definitely something funky going on there, whether it is they're made from the same material, or it is that perhaps the Asira were the first mortals formed entirely by Elan, and that bit of Eton's teeth that actually came down was the bit of godliness that they needed in order to become the Asira instead of just people. A theory that actually just popped into my head as I was saying this. So, yeehaw. What do you guys think?
No, I definitely like this one. Before the stream started, we were kind of talking a bit about the theories, and I had sort of a brain blast because my theory was also on my mind, the part about the golems, and I remembered the quote from Winter's Daughter, which I have the book with me here, and talking about the magic. It goes back to the gods of the ancient giants, the ones known as Typhons. They are prohibited from having children of their own, according to legend, but they found a way to bring forth life from earth and stone. So what if the Asira were made in that method, but instead of using the earth and stone of Elan, they were made with the meteorites from Eden?
Or both. Maybe that is how the mortals were formed, was the stone, rock and stone. And then the bit about the teeth being stolen was the necessary part, because Eaton was the only one that didn't want specifically, and you mentioned this partially in your theory, Jobble, was that Eaton didn't want to make any more kids, but really it's that Eaton didn't want to make any more immortals specifically. It is said in the text immortals, so it is possible that Eaton even knew about the original forming of the mortals. And it's possible, and I hadn't considered this until now, because I've always wondered where the Asiralings, or, the men, dwarves, and elves came from, and the goblins all came from. I always assumed that they just procreated from the Asira, and that there was just some weird Greek god stuff going on, like siblings, having children with the siblings and things like that. But really, with this theory, I think it's possible that they were all formed at the same time, or at least the first generation of these things, and that specific ones were raised into Asirahood or whatever before they were all awake, and that's why the other Asiralings, for lack of a better term, see these big Asira, these ones that are blessed by Grandpa Eaton, with with immortality, or what is seen as immortality when you're a dirt mortal. I don't know how much there is to that. That one just popped into my head as well.
Yeah, about the timeline, I've always assumed that Toulan did come first, and then Trilos, and then Droman Farrell, and then Mari. Just from Mari's description when she talked about her older brothers and how they would take her under her wing and stuff. I mean, theoretically, obviously, we've been tricked many times before in these books. That could be kind of an abstract usage of older brother, where really it was more just a hierarchy type thing.
Indeed.
I mean, that would make sense with the Greek mythology connection, because technically, Zeus is the youngest born, because he's the last one. But then some authors said that Zeus is the oldest because he's the technically all the other ones were Eden, so they weren't born. But then he's the firstborn because he's so it gets really there's a lot of discrepancy around the Greek mythology aspect,
100%.
Which is that connection to this series. I wanted to mention, because you called the guides, I forgot what the sword was called. It's Laurelian. It sounds, I know the joke is that if there's a Y, then it's Elvish, but Laurelian sounds a lot like Krylion, Cryllion, which to any that have not looked at the Esrahaddon maps, which are out, it's the only new thing between Fairlane and Esrahaddon is the fact that this one city is there now. And I was just thinking what if Laurelian is not dwarvish, but it's elfish somehow? There's because I don't know how the dwarven naming conventions are really, really complicated.
Yeah,
they're very hard to pronounce. Why is this sword elvish sounding? Right?
That's a great point, honestly.
Laurelian reminds me of Riyria, which was I think an old city from the Empire, and I believe that's an elvish name.
Yeah,
I think
you're correct.
Where Aquesta used to be was called Riyria.
Wow. That's pretty weird. I don't know if this is simply a relic of when the three peoples were one, or if this is actually deeper there. That's pretty weird. Wow. There's something else that you just mentioned that got my brain going, Liz. Wow. I'll get back to it.
Leon, maps?
No, another bit about the teeth, and this is super out there, and it wasn't off of something that you said. I just was trying to hold on to it there. But this is insanely out there. But if you actually count from your middle tooth from here, you've got 1, 2, 3 that are 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 from your incisor to your canine that are unique, and then the next 2 after that are both kinds of molars, twins maybe even. That's something that I thought about when I was thinking about the teeth theory, but that is probably super coincidental. I was don't laugh at me.
Can you just imagine Michael like going to Robin one day and he's like, I figured out this greatest Easter egg. They'll never figure it out. It's with teeth.
Yeah.
He was on board with this whole video up until this teeth point. And Michael's turned off the video, and Teshlar Seekers are out of the running for any kind of book mentions.
No, actually, a fun thing about that in Egyptian mythology, there was, is it Newt and Ra were married, but some stuff happened. So. Ra got mad at Newt, said that they couldn't have any more children at that time there were 360 days. I think Thoth gambled with the moon god and won, so they created 5 more days, and so that Newt could have 5 more children.
Dude.
And I was like, that's very similar.
5, yeah, very similar.
Refusing to have children.
That was in your video, right?
Yeah. So that's a fun
that was
little
in your
Easter
video,
egg.
the mythology connection one.
But I think we're almost at an hour here. We could probably go on to the next theory.
Yeah, probably.
Next one. Magic spellbooks can exist in Elan. All right, Lizzie, this is yours.
Oh, I love this one with all my heart. Okay, so essentially, if you pull up the Age of Swords quote, it just comes from this. It really just comes from this one paragraph where it's just like they're like Bryn is trying to explain writing to like all her friends for the first time, and she starts reading out the Ornithar in her like weird version, right? And it like makes a light bulb go off in Arion's head, and she like figures out that the Ornithar is like a written down version of the like weave, but like if the weave you could hear it. Like I don't understand weaves because obviously I'm not an artist in that way, but like the weaves seem to be both like the string thing, but also like an audio based type thing. And so in that way, that audio gets transcribed into the Ornithar, and so Arion was able to like sing out the weave, and then also there's like some like other like translation tune thing, right? And that kind of inspires Bryn to make writing the way it is, right, with connecting sounds and to be able to transcribe sounds so it's used later. But the important thing is like that Ornithar is specifically used for the nullifying weave, which like all the artists are able to use. Like Suri does it multiple times against Moandile because Moandile is bad and Suri's better. And the key thing is like if you were to change the symbol slightly, like not in Fairlane where she like crosses them out and that causes the nullifying to go away, but like if you knew it, could you make other spells or other weaves, right? Can you make like the fire weave or whatever? And so that was like my big question and the big thing I wanted to like, I thought about that, and then I was wondering, I guess like the magic spellbook aspect is like, I've never understood magic spellbooks in like Dungeons and Dragons and like other content, but this one, it made sense to me that if the art could be written down onto a book, and then you take the book and you can like, you know, like point it at people and it causes fire, then that's like a magic spell book, and that's that type of art anyone can use. And so the really out there part, and this is the part that made Michael chuckle, if you want to switch to Michael's quote, is I think I asked in the Ask Michael chat, like, if the art can be written down, can Myron become an artist? And that was more of a joke, but I like the thought that anyone can become an artist in this way if you were to figure out how the Ornithar worked, which is actually a project that some of the Elan fans are doing, right? We're trying to write down the Ornithar. Yeah, that's the theory. The theory is that there's more than just the nullifying weave when it comes to Ornithar. There could be other weaves and spells.
I think it is certainly implied by the text, and I'm surprised that you and I never talked about this because it is also something that I've considered. And personally, I think it's why Nifron outlawed writing.
Ooh.
I don't think Nifron is actually interested in outlawing writing for any of the typical reasons why most emperors would outlaw writing. I think Nifron somehow caught on because he's a smart man, smart elf, I should say. Extremely smart, and that was what he was known for, was his ability to foresee things just from a military perspective, and he was extremely paranoid. I think that Nifron probably caught on at some point to the fact that the Ornithar, it stands to reason, and another, you know, not to be super nitpicky nerd here, but Were you referring to Orenfar as the actual just language of the art, or were you referring specifically to the Belgric Lungrine runes that prevent the art from being cast? Because I'm pretty sure the text only implies that the Orenfar specifically refers to the Belgric Lungrine runes that prevent the art from happening.
You're, like, the semantics of it. I referred to it as like written art.
Yeah, and I only want to make that distinction because I think it's important to this theory is that the Orenfar are probably how Nifron figured out that the art can be written. He is a logical person. He thinks, what blocks a weapon? Oh, a shield. This means this is likely he's seen weave shields, magic shields before in fights between artists. He's studied the art a lot for fear of it. And I think there is a distinct possibility that the reason why the reason why it's outlawed is because he determined that the Orenfar was a shield, it was a weave, it was magic being written. And if magic could be written, that means that anyone who learns enough writing sufficiently enough could potentially become an artist. I think this is something Nifron feared. I think it's why he outlawed writing, and I genuinely can't see any other reason for it that's legitimate. I can't remember what the reason is given in the books, but I was immediately like, BS. It's because he's afraid of the art. Like, that's pretty much his entire, thing after the original fight against Mondule. Honestly, even after the original, seeing what happened at the end of Age of Myth between actually, you know what? Screw that. Even it was when he saw his dad die. That's really when he started being insanely paranoid about the art. He was already hateful of it before that, but I think seeing what Lothian did to Zephyron is what made Nifron so extremely anti-art as he was. That's pretty clear in the text. That's not a secret.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about...
Oh, go ahead.
I think what's interesting is that, Nifron's a bit... when he banned writing, he was a bit hypocritical, because he still used the Orenfar in his palace, right? Which, I just want to confirm, do we know if that came down after... Because that palace from Nolan becomes the Teshlar Hall in, Fairlane. Did they remove the... Sorry, this is just more of an Esrahaddon question. Did they remove the Orenfar at that point?
Probably after Mondule becomes the first Pope. I can't remember what the in-world term is.
That makes sense. No, that makes sense. Yeah,
the Patriarch, yeah. Once he becomes the first Patriarch, that's probably when it happened. Or at least maybe a little bit if he was campaigning before that, which we know he was. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
We already know that he was the Patriarch at some point, after... he was a Patriarch before Esrahaddon was in the Sensarium, because there was that whole scene in Riyria Revelations where you have a flashback of Esrahaddon realizing that the Patriarch is an artist. Maybe even, I think he's actually realizing he's Mondule, specifically. So there's also that. I think it is likely that he was campaigning for quite some time to get rid of the Orenfar across the whole city, and that definitely starts in Fairlane, or towards. Was it in the end of Fairlane where he was starting that whole campaign of anti-writing and stuff, or it was in the middle of it roughly? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would have. Not thinking that this theory is true is just the fact that I think it doesn't seem that hard to figure out how to write it, as they were able to sound it out. I mean, in Legends, they were sounding it out, and that's how they figured out that it was the art written down. And so I think later on there would be a lot of this happening if it was possible. If it is possible, I think it would become clear in Esrahaddon when we have the whole Senslers.
Yeah,
I think.
Because they would just sing it and then write it down, and then it's just there. Okay.
Do you think that would actually prevent Nifron from trying to outlaw writing to prevent it, though? You know what I mean? Do you think that fact actually prevents Nifron from outlawing writing simply for fear of learning how to write for this? because I think that that's like it could be if we can see that for sure, like, okay, if this were possible, it would have happened already. I can see that as a possibility, but I still think that Nifron might have thought that it was possible because I can't see any other reason why Nifron would have outlawed writing. Not for any of those legitimate reasons he gave, because they don't make any sense. I'm just like, oh, writing is for smart people. Like, what? You know what I mean? The only thing Nifron fears is the art.
I mean, I think it also could be the book of Bryn. Like, he doesn't really want people down the road to know everything that happened, how he came to power.
But that's true, and I think that's a very good point. But how does preventing writing prevent people from learning about the Book of Bryn? In my opinion, I think that he had the books of Bryn and probably all of that stuff. I think that might have been a factor. He probably had the copies of the books or the Monks of Maribor or any of that, like, ordered burned, obviously, and then outlawed so that they can't make any more. But, that does explain it, and I see my theory breaking down, but I still think about it. I'm going to still think about that a lot.
No,
Damn it, Jobble.
I mean, Nefron probably could have done a media campaign and used writing to his advantage to spread, the history that he wanted. I don't know if Nefron was quite that clever, though.
I think he was.
Mwandale does that exact thing where he uses writing to smudge history. We see it. I mean, even Migrations of Peoples, the big book Fairlane writes, is completely Myron calls it propaganda the entire time. He's like, this is really not true. This doesn't make any sense. And this is Fairlane we're talking about, the only person in all of Elan to understand Turin, and she got it wrong.
Do you think that's because Mwandale changed the Migration of Peoples?
Ooh, that's an interesting theory.
Yeah,
I can believe that, honestly, because I don't think Fairlane would have gotten it wrong, and it wouldn't have been full propaganda.
That or Myron believes that it is full propaganda because he himself is propagandized.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. We did get another comment I like. Matthew brings up about the source needed for this. It might be that, you can write out all the other, weaves and stuff. You can write them out, but because there's no source of powering them, that they won't do anything. Whereas the nullification, because, maybe there's something special about it where it doesn't actually need power, it's actually stopping power, that it doesn't need a source behind it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, wait. I guess when Trilos writes the weave down on the tablets in the Agave, is that not what I'm talking about? Because
it much is.
Right?
I mean, because that's a spell book in the traditional term. It is looking at a book. You don't have the power, the spell has the power. You're just a conduit for it. So you read the spell out, and because you're a conduit for the power, poops out of your fingers or whatever. And in this scenario, that's pretty much more or less what happens with Suri, except there's that also added bit of the art that makes it much more emotional for the reader, which is she can feel what she really needs to do to make it work, which is, sacrifice. That's a bummer, dude.
Yeah.
All right.
Sullivan gets a big goose egg out of 10 for me for killing the dog. I'm just kidding.
All right. I think we have one more theory I think we can get to. And that is that Glenn Morgan was an artist. All right, Callius, this is yours.
Oh, cool. Love this.
Yeah. I didn't really put together too many notes for this one. This is sort of a lightning round theory here. Basically, my thoughts are that Glenn Morgan came from a family of artists or something. They secretly preserved the art after the fall of the empire, and then he used that to become emperor. Because there was definitely a lot of conflict going on at that time, so it seems strange that suddenly just this one man would just rise above everyone else, right? Because maybe he's an artist, and there's a few possible hints to that here and there.
Which
One
Glenn
is
are you
that,
referring to right now? Sorry.
right now, the first one. Yeah, is that Glenn the First made Sheridan University, and he made the Crown Tower. And both of these are like enormous structures that like people can't comprehend like how they were created. I think in the Crown Tower book, Hadrian, when he first comes to Sheridan, he's like, the bricks of this building could have only been moved by giants. So that was kind of like a big like flag for me. And then another is just kind of a political thing, where we know in Revelations that Mondale was actually trying to recreate the empire, but just to do so with like a figurehead at the top that he could control. And obviously, if the figurehead was an artist, he wouldn't be able to control that person. And so that's why he, squashed that empire out. Because that wasn't going to work. Because, the Glenmorgans were at the head. They were artists. They were a threat to him. And it definitely wouldn't be a good look for Mondale if he, went out there and just started a wizard duel with Glenmorgan. So, yeah, I think he just did what he does best, and he just schemed for a few generations, slowly undermined Glenmorgan, and then, convinced the nobles to lock away Glenmorgan III.
I love that, and I think that another thing that adds on to this idea about this family potentially of artists, maybe even if they didn't know that they were artists, because I think that is a good point to bring up specifically in the case of wow, why is his name blanking for me? The painter who's in love with
Oh yeah.
Macaretta. He didn't. It is definitely strongly implied
Sheldon?
that he is an artist. I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
Sheldon, right?
Yes, Sheldon. It is certainly implied by the text that he is an artist beyond simply the lowercase a artist. And he didn't know. He just makes stuff happen. And I think that there's a strong possibility that if not, I think Glenmorgan, I think that the case about the stones being too big is a potential thing there. Even if it was unknown, he is like unwittingly making these things bigger, like, breaking the laws of physics through the art, essentially, where no one really notices until it's already finished. Or he just did it himself like that, and, history just remembers it differently. Or maybe Mondule made history remember differently. And there's also the whole thing with, for me, like, Glenny 3. And I think I mentioned this in the Discord. Glenny 3 doesn't have any issues with pretty much his entire campaign, despite the fact that the entirety of Glenny 2's life, he had, like, chancellors and people like that essentially plotting to get him the hell out of there. All we had was now we have Glenny 3, who is essentially this child that can be manipulated by all of these people, and yet he was still incredibly successful. Now, we don't know enough about him to know whether he was incredibly successful because these were the plans that the chancellors had for him from the get-go, or if this is like, despite all of this, he never got assassinated and was just doing stuff on his own because he's got this literal universal bubble protecting him of like, I do what I want to do and I don't want to die, so I ain't dying. Not sure how really possible that is with Glenn the Third. There's not a lot to it there, but it certainly seems like he was really successful in spite of people directly working against him since before he was even born.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see that happening. I think throughout the whole Glenmorgan 1, 2, and 3 reign, I think Mondale was heavily involved. Toulan could have been involved. Toulan almost certainly was involved in the background doing something, as well as Trilos. So I think they were all involved. I think it could go either way in the end. Sullivan could choose to write it however he wants.
When did
Yeah.
the Glenn Morgan stuff actually go down? Like, between which written books do we have? That's between Esrahaddon and
Esrahaddon and
and
Crown
yeah.
Yep.
So in that case, I think that there is. I don't think there's a potential that we'll see it with Esrahaddon, because that obviously happens after Esrahaddon's time. I don't know how far after. I can't remember.
Esrahaddon's alive.
It's about 300 years after the fall of the Empire is when Glenn Morgan comes around.
Well, there you go. And Esrahaddon was 900 years locked away, right? So there you go. I think that it is an interesting idea that if Trilos is poking somewhere, it is almost certainly without Mondulé and not involving Mondulé anymore. I think that after Nolan, Mondulé and him are done. I think that was pretty explicit, and so that's pretty cool that we now have to think about pretty much everything after Nolan in the terms of this could have been Trilos, egging on Golrock in some way that he can see, far in the future, or it's Mondulé trying to get back to Erebon, or just maybe some unknown thing that we don't know about. Macaretta trying to get Mondulé back. I don't know.
Awesome, yeah.
That's very strange. Cool.
Perfect. Any other thoughts on this or any of the theories today?
I just wanna like adding on. I believe the Crown Tower was part of a larger palace, right? So if the Crown Tower is already like a monument, right? Like, I don't know, the way it's described, it sounds like it rivals Avampartha as like an engineering like marvel.
Yo.
Right? And if it's already like part of a giant castle, like the only other structure I can think of that would match that was like the new palace at the very end, when like they're like, wow, like Magnus, this is great, this looks amazing. Like, I think that like having, because that's what happened, right? The Empire moved from Perseplicus to not Blythen, but like Rochelle to Ervanon, right? And that's where the palace was, and the Crown Tower is just a bit of that. So it was like, that's a lot of movement, like already. That's a lot of moving around just for Glenny. And like they made a giant like building in the north, which like has no resources as far as I can tell. Like later on in Revelations, it's just where the church is. That's it. There's no like trading. There's no like anything. It's just kind of crazy that they were able to do this.
Another thing to consider is that the Crown Tower was made, during a time of like pretty significant conflict. Like the 300 years following the fall of the Empire was just people squabbling for power. Like, you don't really think there would be the infrastructure at that point to like accomplish such a feat as making the tower.
Mm-hmm.
Man, maybe Mondulé just entirely fabricated the story of Glenn Morgan raising the Crown Tower specifically so he could have his own Avampartha on the western side.
Yeah.
I've thought about that as well, yeah. Could be Mondulé that made it.
That's nuts. I never thought about that.
I wonder if it amplifies his powers too, like similar to Avampartha. Like, I mean, Avampartha, the amplification is from the falls, which is part of the name. But like, I wonder if he's able to do his like, what's it called? He describes the exact powers, but the ability to see everything and the ability to hear everything. I wonder if because that's what he does for like the rest of the series. He just sits in that tower and just watches and hears everything.
I think it's aided by height. I think, honestly speaking, that like there is a certain level of like physicality to it, and it's almost like a plane, like that's scanning from above, like a freaking UAV, literally getting a scan of what's going on from above, because that's where he has to put his physical mind to do it the best way. At least that gives him more reach. It's possible that it was amplifying power, that Avampartha amplifies that power not just because of the falls, but because it matches like how you're supposed to do that in the physical world normally. So it just amplifies that idea instead of using a drone or a plane as the camera source. It's using the mind of the person who's up high in the tower. More limited, obviously, than a freaking plane or a drone, but same kind of idea.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me think of the
wild.
Lord of the Rings movies with Sauron's town, the eye at the top watching everything.
Yeah, which may just be the reference in and of itself, to be honest with you.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I'm cool with that too. I always tell people that Sullivan's Elan books are essentially just modern day Tolkien, with way better character writing. Tolkien's got the world building, but Sullivan's got the character writing down packed.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Any other thoughts?
This is my cat Charlie. That is my thought.
Awesome. Well, this was super fun, guys. Thanks for taking time to do this. We'll see if people like it. We can continue to do it in the future. I'm sure some people are going to be watching this in like 3 months and laughing at how wrong we were on so many things.
I hope so. Please laugh at us.
Like next summer, post Esrahaddon discussion.
That does remind me. Another thing, Esrahaddon. I'm hoping to see Tech Chin. I think that was a big out.
Agreed. I'm so hoping for Tech Chin, man.
I'm holding out for him. So we'll find out in a few months.
Yeah.
Final thought from me. Do any of us want to talk about the Esrahaddon preview chapter at all?
I want to. I've been wanting to, but like I don't know. It's been like an hour and a half almost.
I think I'm gonna hold it. I don't want to.
I think we should hold it.
No one's read it yet, so. But definitely, I want to thank everyone in the chat too. We've had people watching the entire time. Thank like Jessica, Matthew, Rich, Josh. Thanks everyone for coming. But yeah,
we appreciate you.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Thanks everyone. Again, join the Discord if you haven't already, and we'll talk more there. But thanks everyone.
Like and subscribe.
And thank you, Jobble, for putting all this together.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. It makes it easier for me. All right. See you guys later.
All right. Later.
Bye-bye.